Hello, this is Nathan Thomas Milliner, writer and director of The Confession of Fred Krueger, and you are listening to Elm Street Radio.
Hi Nightmare fans, Deandra here with this week's episode of Elm Street Radio. Welcome listeners, happy to have you on board. Yes, we took a little bit of a break, actually a little bit over a month, but we have been working really hard on Fredheads the documentary and just staying really busy. So that's why we're very excited to bring you this week's special episode of Elm Street Radio. This week, we have on Nathan Thomas Milliner, who is an artist and a filmmaker. You've seen his work on NECA packaging for Scream Factory and for Horror Hound. You've also seen his work on the Never Sleep Again book, the hardcover. That beautiful image of the girl in the bed, that is Nathan's work. And I'm not talking about the Never Sleep Again documentary, but the book hardcover specifically. So if you've seen that once again is something that Nathan has put together. He's also been involved in Volumes of Blood and some other horror gems you might see out there, including a fan film called The Confession of Fred Krueger. Now, this is a very interesting fan film. It is about Freddy before he was burned. It's while he's being interrogated, and he gives us a little bit of backstory. But this is not the Freddy that is Robert's Freddy. And what I mean by that is that he's not the Freddy that we see in Freddy's Dead. He's not a family man. He is someone that is the loner and the dark, kind of wimpy-ish figure that we see in the first Nightmare on Elm Street. This is based off of a short story. Another thing that makes him not Robert's Freddy is, even though he has some of Robert's mannerisms, Kevin Roach plays Freddy, and he doesn't really look like Robert. When you watch it, it's not really Robert, but you know it's Freddy, and you watch him and you see Freddy Krueger. And this is one of the instances in which it's a testament to the fact that Robert Englund is not the only person who can really play Freddy. And Nathan puts this story together and chooses the right cast, and it's still Freddy. And that's when you know really who Freddy is, that you can figure that out and find the right formula to make it work. Nathan is an extraordinary filmmaker. He wanted to see this movie come to life, and I'm so glad he did. It premiered at Horror Hound Weekend in Indianapolis in 2015, which ironically is actually taking place this weekend. And Nathan premiered it there, and it was the thing that I was looking to most of all about the weekend. It was like a Nightmare Palooza. Unfortunately, it was right after Wes died, but I saw it and I fell in love with it, and it was a stunning tribute to the Nightmare films. So I hope you've seen it. If not, you can find it on YouTube, but we get a chance to talk to the filmmaker, and I'm super excited to bring to you our episode with Nathan Thomas Milliner.
State your name. Frederick Charles Krueger. Spell Krueger. Krueger.
Here we are, Elm Street fans, with Nathan Thomas Milliner. How are you doing, Nathan?
I'm doing awesome. How you doing?
I am doing so great, and it's really wonderful to have you on today because I've known you for quite some time, and you have a lot of things that you've done in the world of horror, and I'll never forget when I went to Days of the Dead in 2011, their very first convention, and I saw you there. You were the only person to have Nancy Thompson artwork. And I remember I was so excited, and then you gifted me with one of your pieces, and it meant the world to me, and I will never, ever, ever forget that kindness, because I was super overwhelmed at that convention, but you were very welcoming, and you've always stood out in my mind ever since.
Yeah, I was just blown away. I saw Nancy Thompson walking down the aisle, and I had literally never seen that before. And you looked just like her, and your dad was there dressed as Donald, and I was like, just really like, wow, this is Nancy. You know, like somebody's actually doing that, and her dad's there supporting her, which I thought was so cool. I remember talking to him about trying to find accessories for you to be carried around. We talked about the sledgehammer. And I remember you came. I think it was the second time you came through. I just came and gave you that artwork, and I said, you know, if anybody deserves to have this artwork, you need to have it. I glad I stopped you because you've been a great friend and collaborator at times, and really proud to see where you've gone because I mean, you were just how old were you then in 2011?
I was like 17 at the time. I think I was 17. I'm 24
I mean, you were just this little kid, really. And I thought, and you've grown into such a productive, strong young woman. It's been really cool to watch you, kind of blossom and become. You became Nancy. Really. I mean, as corny as that is to say, you were just this young kid, really, and just to constantly see you growing up and all the things you've been doing and, your work with Paige and everyone else is, I'm really proud of you guys.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And you have always been a mentor, and I know I'm getting the mushy stuff out of the way so we can get down to some of the really good questions, but you've always been a mentor to us and anything we've done. And for anybody out there who's listening, who maybe hasn't seen Don't Fall Asleep or has, you'll notice that Dr. Milliner gives the recommendation to Dr. Sims about Nancy in Don't Fall Asleep, and that was because of Nathan, and because that whole time he was giving us advice, and he's always been this force of wisdom. And I always love seeing your posts on Facebook because you're always so level-headed and insightful, and many times very, very funny. But your posts are poignant, and I love your perspective on filmmaking and on the horror genre, and just all the art you put out there. How long have you been doing art, and what all adventures do you do with art? Because I know you're far and wide, and I always find you everywhere.
I've been drawing since I was probably about 5 years old. Like, I wasn't aware of it until first grade. I was 6, and my first grade teacher noticed it, and she had mentioned it to my mom, and she talked about how, if you ask a normal child to draw a house, they'll draw a square, or maybe a door, or a roof, maybe a chimney or a window. Because Nathan draws the shutters and the bricks and the sidewalk and the, So it's really, to me, it's about observation. It's about seeing everything in detail. I think I think most artists are that way. We just see the world in great detail, and we pay attention more, I think, to everything around us. And that goes for actors. Actors are observant, and they are mimicking or trying to understand why things work the way they do. Same with writers. Writers listen, they pay attention, they understand how people talk and communicate with one another, respond to things. So I think just being an artist in general is about being observant and seeing everything meticulously and dissecting it and analyzing it. And she recognized that in me at that young age, that I was seeing things on a different scale, I guess. And she sat me down in front of the classroom at her desk and basically taught me how to draw, how to teach my mind's eye to understand how to work together and how to translate what I was seeing onto the paper. And so ever since then, I've just drawn and got really, I always loved to film, so I was really into storytelling, and that was kind of a transition I made because I got into comic books in high school, and I started writing my own comics, and that's kind of where the storytelling came. And I kind of just want to try as many things as I can. It was kind of just this transition into filmmaking.
How many films have you made up to this point, Nathan?
I think I'm on number 7.
Wow.
Most of them have been shorts because I have the art career, so I don't have a whole lot of time. Like, if it were up to me, I would make films only. Like, I've gotten to where it's the new challenge. It's the thing that excites me the most. But it's, it's time consuming. I have a wife, I have a kid, I have a day job, I have my art career and everything else. So finding the time to make movies has been one of the most difficult things to balance in life. So, but I really love it. I love it to death. Like it motivates me to get up every day. And I mean, I still love art and everything, but the filmmaking has really become this thing that I want to understand more. I want to grow. I want to learn. And, I'm, working on stuff now, and I'm starting to work with other filmmakers, and yeah, it's just, it's where I'm at right now. I really am so consumed with filmmaking.
Now, how long have you been a fan of A Nightmare on Elm Street? Because, you have such a great view of film, and films have such a powerful impact on people, and I know that you're a horror fan. So even before Nightmare, in general, how did you become a horror fan, and then how did you get into A Nightmare on Elm Street?
I did not grow up with anyone who was into the genre. Like you hear a lot of fans. I get kind of envious because there are a lot of fans who have been watching them since they were young. My parents really weren't into them. I didn't have any older siblings or uncles or anyone who was into horror who influenced me. So I saw generally what was more popular at the time. Like I was born in '76, so I saw like Michael Jackson's Thriller, of course, on MTV was mind blowing for me at the time. Like I was 82, so I was about 6 or 7 when that came on, and that just kind of blew me away. And then I saw Poltergeist and Twilight Zone, the movie, the more mainstream Spielberg stuff. But I didn't really see a whole lot, and I was always nervous about it. But I always loved the dark occult stuff. Like I loved Halloween, the season. I loved drawing Dracula and Frankenstein's monster and things like that during October. And it was always something that I was, I was drawn to the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, the Disney cartoon, things like that. But I was always still kind of nervous about horror because it was something that was kind of taboo. Your parents, my parents didn't really want me to have nightmares and things. So, that influences you. And I remember, I was 8 years old when Nightmare on Elm Street came out. And I remember the TV spots. And I vividly remember the part where Nancy's running up the stairs and her feet sink into the stairs. And that kind of bothering me. And so I wasn't watching those films. And then my dad watched it on cable one night, told us the next morning about how he'd had a nightmare that night about Freddy, and Freddy had killed him with a nightmare, and I'm like, I'm not watching that stuff, And I remember going to the VHS store and seeing, like, Freddy's Revenge and seeing Freddy's burnt face looking at you, smiling, like, no, thank you. But I remember, I think it was 86 or so, my dad and I were up one night, my mom and sister were in bed, and Return of the Living Dead came on, and we watched it, and had so much fun with it. I think that's the first time I remember watching a horror film where I was just having a ball. Maybe it was because I was with my dad, or because we didn't watch a lot of movies together. He was never a big movie guy. And so we watched it, and at the end, they revealed that it's in Louisville, Kentucky, which is where I'm from. That was our town. So we were laughing that they were blowing up Louisville. And then, as far as Nightmare, I don't know. I mean, I got into Nightmare right before Dream Master came out. 1988, I was 12. And I think at that time, that was when Freddy was at his height. Like, that was when he was really becoming part of the mainstream.
Yeah.
The TV show was about to come out. He was on MTV. There was the Dream Warrior, the Dawkins song. And the Dream Warriors had really blown up and made him more out there in pop culture. And when I look back at it, I think that really maybe what it was Will Smith. Because
Will Smith? That is something I've never heard before, ever.
Yeah, because I think that, when I was in middle school, when this came out, we had music class back then, and when music class, you had to dance and sing and all that stuff that guys didn't want to do, and I was a very shy, insecure kid. And I was a new kid in school, so I didn't want to dance, sing in front of these people. But we had to, and the teacher had us dancing to 2 songs that year, and they were Como D's, Wild Wild West, and DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince's Parents Just Don't Understand. And, hip hop was fairly new. It was just kind of breaking out. I knew Run DMC, I knew the Beastie Boys, but like I didn't know who these guys were. And I went to Target and bought those tapes because I was listening to these songs every day at school, all day. And the first song on DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince's album was "Welcome to Nightmare on My Street." And here's Will Smith rapping about Freddy and Nancy. And at that time, even though I'd never seen the films, I knew who Freddy was, and I kind of heard the name Nancy. And I think that song just kind of made it okay, or kind of perked my interest. And then I was seeing all the TV spots for Dream Master, and then I saw a commercial for Dream Warriors was premiering on cable, and they were double featuring it with Freddy's Revenge. And I said, "Mom, I think I want to watch these." And she, "Are you sure?" I was like, "Yeah." So we stayed up. I recorded it on VHS tape, and I watched them. And I see Mark Patton sitting there on that school bus, and Freddy all of a sudden stands up, and he's coming at them. And I'm so loving everything about it. Like, it was something that I had not experienced ever. That whole dynamic of where you're scared, but then you just have such a ball with it. You're laughing, you're having fun. And I was just completely overtaken by Freddy Krueger at that moment in those films. And over the course of that fall, I watched those movies over and over and over. And then I went and saw Dream Master. It's kind of a funny story. My dad took me and my friend, he dropped us off at the local mall to watch Dream Master. And he didn't buy our tickets for us. So I go up with my friend, we're 12 years old, and we go to buy tickets for Dream Master. And the guy laughs at us and says, you can't get into this, you got to be 17. So I had to call my dad and say, hey, we couldn't get in, and he had to take us. And so I think it was my first horror film in a theater. It was my first nightmare film, and my dad was there, and, he was not into that stuff, but he took me. I don't know if your dad was into Nightmare, but, I think it's awesome that he came with you as Donald Thompson.
My dad was not. Nobody in my family was. I mean, they sometimes watched horror, and I think that was some of my first exposure was my mother and my dad watching. I remember What Lies Beneath, and then my cousin liked some of the Universal monster movies, so I would watch Frankenstein versus the Wolfman and the Wolfman constantly, but I was always afraid of horror. And I knew who Freddy was from popular culture, and I think from being on TV a few times, but other than that, I'd never really watched the movies because I was always so afraid. But
yeah.
So when then did you start to, because I know your film, The Confession of Fred Krueger, is based on the short story, and if you could remind us all what that story is called.
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said, that night I went and saw Dream Master. I spent the night at my friend's house, and we rented the original film because I still hadn't seen it. And I remember we rented that. We rented Father Like Son, I think it was, with Kirk Cameron and Dudley Moore. And I just remember that movie so much because there were so many important things that happened to me that night, because I saw Nightmare on Elm Street for the first time, which is my favorite horror film ever. And I saw Nightmare 4 in the theaters, which I adore. And he also introduced me to the X-Men that night. I remember I had no idea who the X-Men were, and I'd never seen Wolverine, so I became obsessed with Wolverine after that night, too.
There were a lot of knives involved that night.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of different knives.
Guys with knives on their hands, that was my thing, I guess. And so I just remember that I thought about that a while back. I was like, it's so amazing that I saw Nightmare on Elm Street that night and was introduced to Wolverine on the same evening. But when I get into movies, same way, I'm still the same way I am. I get consumed about it. Like, I become obsessive, and being an artist, I would immediately start drawing Freddy all of the time. Getting in trouble in class, drawing Freddy. I still have some of those drawings, which is so funny. I come across them, but
have you posted them? Because I would totally love to see them.
Yeah, I do. I think there's an album like the old stuff or something on my page, and I have some in there from like 1988, 1989. But the thing is, back then there was no internet, of course. So if I was drawing from memory. The only way you would have images, if you sit there and pause the film or whatever, which I never did. I would never thought to do that at 12 years old back then. But like Fangoria, you'd buy a Fangoria issue, and I'd buy the Fangorias, and I'd have the posters of Freddy on my wall, and I would draw those. There was a Part 4 pull-out I remember I loved, where he's kind of standing there with some boiler room stuff. It was like a centerfold. I should be having centerfolds of, like, you know, Christy Brinkley, but I got a centerfold of Freddy on my wall.
Hey, that's okay. So do I.
So, yeah, I would draw that, and then, but I was like, I wonder if there's any books, as I'd like to learn more about the movie as well. And we went to the bookstore at the mall, and they didn't have anything, but the guy looked it up in their system and found The Nightmare on Elm Street Companion by Jeffrey Cooper, who had written the novelizations. And we went ahead and ordered that. And I think it came out in 1987. It was the making of the first two films, and it had a little bit about Dream Warriors, but I think it was mostly off script, but Wes's original script, because I remember it was also different, and the characters' names were different. But yeah, in that book was printed a chapter called The Life and Death of Freddy Krueger that Jeffrey had written, and it was Freddy's origin story. And of course it was different because Dream Warriors hadn't come out yet, so like there was no Amanda Krueger. I think Freddy's mom was like some diseased whore or something like that, and she died in childbirth or shortly after, and Freddy was raised by a succession of axe murderers and rapists and pimps, and he was raised by a pimp who would beat him with a razor strop and cut him with a straight razor, and it was some dark shit. I mean, it was really messed up. And, you know, talked about how he paid an arson to burn down the guy's house, and then he lived on the streets and made his way to Springwood. And it had the whole alleyway scene where he just, you know, comes up with the idea of the glove. He kills his first kid and becomes a, you know, I don't think they were calling him a Springwood slasher at that time, but it just really captured my imagination. It was so sick and twisted. And I said, I want to see this. You know, I want to see this movie. And for the next, you know, I don't know how long I waited for that movie to happen. You know, and then Freddy's Dead comes out, and they completely 180 it. And it had a little bit elements, you know, wasn't a pimp, but the Mr. Underwood character was definitely based on that character, I think. And I just, you know, I felt cheated a little bit because I fell in love with this character that was presented to me in Wes Craven's original film, and then the sequels to that. And all of a sudden he's a suburbanite who has a daughter and a wife, and that's not right. You know, I was like, that's so.
It was really different from Wes's version, and that's why, you know, I think I love fan films all the time, and that's why I was so drawn to yours, is because it's very much along the lines of the first movie, but at the same time it's also its own entity.
Well, that was what I had noticed over the years was, you know, once they got into Dream Warriors, I think when people think of Freddy now, they think of Dream Warriors. They think of Dream Master, and they think of that era. The Kevin Yeager makeup, the stripes on the sleeves, you know, the puns, the one-liners, and the anti-hero Freddy, I guess. And, you know, I felt like the original Freddy was kind of erased in some way. Like, people forgot that he even had, you know, just red bare sleeves on his sweater, and everything about that first movie, it was different. His clothes were baggier, he was sloppier, he wasn't as confident, he kind of hunched over, and, you know, of course, David Miller's makeup was different, the hat was different, he was dirtier and Hobie, you know, like he looked very unkept, you know, and he didn't stand confidently, and I don't know, there was just so much about that first movie that I felt had been lost as the character progressed and changed, because he changed from film to film, and I felt like that had been lost. I felt like it had been lost, and I said, I want to see. I held out for so long that I wanted to see Robert play the real guy, because I felt I wanted to see Robert actually have more to do than just show up and say one-liners and slash people. It's like, this guy is a, you know, classically trained Shakespearean actor. You know, I want to see him get a chance to really play the human Fred Krueger. And I held out for it, and, you know, there were rumors, you know, Robert was pretty much done with the role, but he said he would love to do the prequel. And so I held out for it, and then when they did the remake, I said, well, I guess it's over. The studio, the licensed people have moved on. Robert's moved on. So we're probably never going to get that. I'm not going to see that Jeffrey Cooper story. I'm not going to see, Wes's original version of Freddy. Although I heard that, I think it was John McNaughton who did Henry of Portrait of a Serial Killer, had almost made the sequel or prequel, and Robert had said in the script that he had abandoned the whole family man angle in that script. But yeah, it was never going to happen. And so I was talking with some friends and other fans on Facebook one day, and we were talking about the prequel that never happened. And they said, well, why don't you write one? I said, well, that's pointless. They're never going to make it. I'll be wasting my time. I said, well, just write it for fun. As well. So for a couple of days went by, and I thought, why not? I'll do something fun, but I'm not going to write a feature film. That's a lot of work to write a feature film script. Mm-hmm. I said, but what if I just write like a short, just to kind of get it out of me? Because I'd had this thing for 25 years of wanting to see this. And it's like, I'll just write something for fun just to kind of get it out, scratch that itch and get it out for fun. Not really, I never planned on actually making it. It was just something like, I just need to get this out of me. And I thought about, okay, if I'm going to do a short, what's the one scene I want to see? If I were writing a feature film, what's the one scene I would be most excited about? And I'm a huge fan of like conversation in film, like Tarantino, Richard Linklater. These guys are like my favorite writers, filmmakers. They're all about dialogue. They're all about conversation. There's nothing more I love than watching really good actors have a conversation in a film. And when I thought about it, I thought about like Mickey Knox in Natural Born Killers. It's my favorite scene in that movie, where he does his interview with Robert Downey Jr. And it got me thinking about I'd written about some serial killers. I'd written a comic in the 90s about a serial killer, and I had studied and researched serial killers like really intensely, to the point where I got physically sick from reading all these books. Like, they just disgusted me. After a while, I could not take it anymore. Like, I had consumed so much about Ed Gein and Albert Fish and Ed Kemper and all these guys that it just like, I can't read any more of this. I'm going to throw up. Yeah. So.
And you incorporated a lot of that into your film as well. Didn't you have a couple of nods in there?
Yeah, he quotes Charles Manson in the film, which a lot of people have caught. Charles Manson was doing an interview, and someone asked who he was. And he said, I'm nobody. I'm a boxcar. I'm a hobo. I'm a jug of wine. But I'm a straight razor if you get too close to me. Something like that. And when I heard him say that, I said, that's Freddy Krueger. Like, that is who he was to me. That was the image of Freddy in my head. It's like, I'm putting that in this movie. But yeah, one of the biggest influences of the film was in the 1990s on HBO. There was a documentary series called The Iceman Confessions about the hitman Richard Kuklinski, who was known as the Iceman. And it was a psychiatrist talking to Richard, who was a complete sociopath, he murdered with no remorse. It was like an hour and a half long conversation. I think they did 2 of them. And I just remember being completely intrigued. And, in the 90s, serial killers became, even, 70s, 80s, 90s was really kind of the time of serial killers were really, you had Ted Bundy and Gacy and Ramirez, and all these guys were popping up, Son of Sam. But in high school, in the 1990s, in 1991, I think it was, Jeffrey Dahmer was caught. And for me, growing up, you didn't hear about serial killers. Kids didn't, parents kept that stuff away from you. But I was like 15, 16 years old, and here was this guy who was killing people and eating them and putting them in his fridge, and it was like, what? Like, I had never experienced anything. I'd never heard of something so evil, completely evil. And, that was the same year that Silence of the Lambs came out. And, Hannibal Lecter became part of everything. And I loved Silence of the Lambs. And then a few years later, 7 comes out, and 7 blew me away. And that was another thing that was influential of Confession, was the John Doe conversation in the back of the car.
Oh, my God. gosh. I'm sorry, I love Kevin Spacey. That's so interesting. I love it. Wow.
I love that scene. Like those scenes, I memorized that conversation. I could quote it back then. I could quote Mickey Knox's. So the whole thing about Confession, that came from that obsession of those conversations with killers, because I'd watch Kuklinski, the Iceman Confessions, and I was so intrigued by what this guy was saying. I was repelled and disgusted, but he was so charming as well. There was something about him that I was intrigued to hear him talk about it. And that's really what it was. Like, I want to hear Freddy talk about what he did. Because there's a lot of people like, oh, he confessed, he couldn't get off. You kind of screwed that up. I've gotten some criticism about that. And, like, I don't care. I wanted to just hear Freddy tell a story. And I thought, what's the best setup for him to talk, to tell his story? It's like, could he just talk to some guy in a cell? Nah, that's boring. But the interrogation, I thought about the interrogation. I thought about, the Dark Knight and the Joker talking to Batman in the Dark Knight, and how incredible that scene was. And watching Heath Ledger, just kill it as the Joker, and how chilling it was. And it's like, that's what I want to see with Freddy. I want that really bad. And that's what I decided to write. And I wrote The Confession of Fred Krueger pretty much that night. And again, I wrote it just for fun, but there was part of me was like, this is actually kind of good. I really want to see this. And so I played around with just making it with my friends and not ever like releasing it, just not really putting a lot of effort in it, just to record it, just to do it and share it with my friends. And
so then how did you get Kevin on board? How did that all go down? Because, the thing about it is, is that he does such a good job. And I know people have said he doesn't look like Robert, but to me, he looks like Freddy, and he acts like Freddy, which is another comment based on what you said earlier. I'll go into a little bit later on, but if you could talk about that, making the film and kind of going into it, how you saw Kevin, how he was Freddy to you.
Oh well, yeah. At first I was going to make it. My friend Chuck Miller was going to play Freddy. I had made a film called A Wish for the Dead, and there was a serial killer in the beginning of the film. And Chuck just had this look, but he wasn't a professional actor. He was a wrestler, and he had done a few. I say wrestler, but he was not a big guy. He was a small guy. So he wouldn't have looked weird playing Freddy. He was built like Robert, kind of. So, and he was a big Freddy nerd, and I was going to play Russell. Like I said, we were just going to make it for fun. I had done a little acting, but I wasn't a trained actor. But we were just going to make it for fun at that point, and we played around with doing it, and then at one point he just bailed out, and somebody said, well, you should play Freddy. Nobody knows the character more. And I was like, I can't, I don't resemble Robert at all. I'm a big guy, 6'2", 250, and I don't look anything like him. And like, people are so adamant about Robert that unless you look like him, it's really hard to make them accept it. And even though I can imitate him, because I do my imitation of him in the end of Confession when Freddy laughs. That's me doing the laugh and saying Nancy. But we played around with it. But then after I finished Wish for the Dead, I was invited to be at a film festival in Owensboro, Kentucky. And the guy that ran the festival was a guy named PJ Starks, and he was making a horror anthology called Volumes of Blood. And he asked me if I would be interested in directing a segment. And I was really unfulfilled with Wish for the Dead because I was so green. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I made a lot of mistakes. And I was, I let a lot of my insecurities kind of have me make bad decisions on it. But I knew that I was capable of doing more. And that in between the time, it was about 3 years. Between that time, I had done a lot more study and a lot more reading and trying to understand filmmaking, and I really wanted another crack at it, but I didn't think I ever would. And when this guy was asking me to direct again, I was like, absolutely, I'd love to. So I dove really hard into it. But he sent me these scripts, and I read these scripts, and there was one that I really liked called the Encyclopedia Satanica, although I really wanted to rewrite it because it was a little more campy and fun. and there were just things that needed fleshing out. And I said, I want to do this, but if I can rewrite it, I'll definitely do it. So they let me rewrite it, and he had pre-cast the film. And for the antagonist, he had cast a guy named Kevin Roach from Evansville, Indiana, who I had never seen or heard of, didn't know anything about him. But I had cast my friend Christine Renee Farley as the lead, and she knew him. She was from Evansville. She had worked with him a lot. She loved him, adored him, said he's great. And the reason he was cast as the antagonist is because nobody does bad guys better than Kevin Roach at that point. Like, everybody wanted Kevin to play bad guys, and to the point where Kevin didn't want to do bad guys anymore.
Kevin was being typecast.
Yeah, and he said, I don't want to. I think Satanica was kind of his line in the sand, like, I'm not going to play bad guys anymore. And so I saw a picture of him. I was like, this guy's got an interesting look. There's a little menace there. And then I met him, and he was just so professional, so intelligent, and talented for days. And then heard that voice. I'm like, geez, like, this guy has to play Freddy Krueger, And I thought, I'm going to work with him and see what he's like. So we made Volumes of Blood. That we directed a segment called the Encyclopedia Satanica. And on that film, I met a lot of people. And one of the more important people as well was David Bennell, who was my cinematographer and editor. And David, I learned so much from working with him, and we just hit it off right away. It was the first time working with each other, and we were like, we thought a lot. Kevin said, David and I think alike, and he said, I think that's why you guys worked so well together. And it was this kind of feeling like Volumes of Blood was a really stressful thing because we were only given one night to film our movie at this library. We were given 8 hours, and that was getting in, loading up, setting up, shooting, and getting out.
It. I had no idea.
And Satanica was a 24-minute movie. So the rule is 1 minute per screen time is like 1 hour of shooting time. We had 8 hours to shoot a 24-minute movie. And the only way we did it was like painstakingly plan that movie. And to the point where all of us were on the same page. I taught, we rehearsed with actors. I taught to them. Everybody knew I storyboarded the whole thing. I came in like over-prepared just because I knew I had to. We had a lot of issues, so we did end up getting a couple more, like one more night to do. I think we got like 4 or 5 more hours on another night to finish it up. And then we had some problems with audio and things that we had to have like a pickup night, which turned into like 35 minutes because we were having trouble with the camera and the place was going to close and we couldn't stay. So yeah, it was one of these nightmare kind of shoots, but we were really proud of it because we really did. I think we made a really decent film out of that. But the thing is, the consensus was that we all really liked each other and worked well with each other and wanted to do something again immediately. Like Kevin and David were both telling me, whatever you want to do, I want to do something else. We need to do something else. And that's because I had thought, I just thought about, well, I got this thing called The Confession of Fred Krueger that I wrote for fun, and I got this gut feeling that Kevin was born to play Freddy Krueger, and so I ran it by Kevin, and I said, how would you feel about playing Freddy Krueger? He's like, of course I would love to play Freddy Krueger. And I'm like, damn it, then we're doing that. He was a fan, and I said, okay, so we started talking about it, and we were still putting Volumes of Blood together, finishing our film, but we were already talking about making Confession. And I kind of, like, since I had just decided to focus on the first film in Jeffrey Cooper's book, I just said, if you forget about 1985 and beyond and you just think about Freddy, we don't know what Freddy looked like. As long as you play... I wasn't interested in him being Robert. I had written the script with Robert's voice and vocabulary in my head. So it was definitely written for Robert Englund. And my thing with Kevin was, I said, you don't look like Robert. You look enough like him. I said, but I don't want you to mimic Robert Englund. I want to see Freddy Krueger. My goal here is to see the character, not the actor. I don't want to see, like, you're a good enough actor. that your choices are going to work for this part. As long as we take, I said, if you keep the vocabulary familiar, if this sounds like Freddy, if what he says sounds like Freddy, if his motivations and everything sounds like Freddy, then I think some people are going to jump on board with it and go with it. And I said, if you hit those certain words like my children and piggies and things, if you say that stuff the way Robert said them, that's going to be enough to where people are going to jump on board and say, okay, I can accept this guy. And so we worked on that. We worked on the physicality, which was really difficult because I knew Freddy, I knew Robert's performance, I knew how he walked, I knew how he stood, I knew, because I'm visual, I'm an artist, so I've drawn him, I know how he stands. I knew that he rolled the cuff up on. I mean, there's so many details that are in the movie. The way, to where everything is precise. The way he wore his hat. Kevin would make me put the hat on him. He would not put the hat on himself because he said, put it on the right way. So it was all these little details in the stance. And what was really funny about getting Kevin to do those moves and walks and stances is Kevin's pigeon-toed.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
I never noticed that.
I would have to physically put him in those poses and things because he couldn't do it. And so it was really fun. I mean, he's such a, he's just one of those guys. He's just so talented. And when we would film the show, and I would be on set watching him. Especially I think it was a scene where he's talking about being a child. And I was so lost in what he was doing that I forgot to say cut like several times because I was like looking at Fred Krueger. That's how it felt. And I would look over it, like there was a guy named John Gass who was like a PA on the film, and there's one point where Kevin's just doing this monologue and we're on the other side of the camera, and I look over at him and he's looking at me and he's mouthing the words, "Oh my God, this is awesome." And I'm like, I know, it's just, I knew it was something special. And yeah, it was, I couldn't have, it's like, I was so happy that we waited to make the movie, and I had found the right people. David was the right guy to shoot it, the right guy to edit it. Lito Velasco came on and scored it incredibly, beautifully, perfect. I mean, I had always really, when I would work with a composer, I always had ideas, and I would really be vocal about it. I would say, I want music here, and I want this to sound like this. With Lito, I was like, dude, you're an Elm Street fan. I know that. You love this as much as I do. Just give me Charles Bernstein. Give me Nightmare 1. And that was it. And he went off and came up with that score, and it was perfect, as I knew it would be. So it was like, it was a combination of just all the perfect people at the right time that I just feel really blessed that those people were in my life at that moment.
You and I are such big Nightmare fans, and I am a very, very much a huge advocate of, well, I don't want to start that way, but I think the notion, and we all know the impact that Robert has had on Freddy Krueger, and, even with the hat and everything, despite the differences, there are those elements of Freddy that have to be there simply because they're so important to the character, but at the same time, to have that difference, and because of your knowledge of serial killers and Freddy and in general, I think that's what made it work, is Freddy so well, and it's not I know Robert's Freddy so well, it's I know Freddy Krueger so well, because I think people always try to limit it to Robert, but I think when you have an actor who understands Freddy Krueger and you have a director and a writer who understands the main founding principles of that character and what they represent, you can make a very good interpretation and a story worth telling, because Freddy is more than one man. He is a legacy, a lesson. He's the everyday demons that we all fight. And that's why I love The Confession of Fred Krueger so much, not just because it's shot well and the score is great and everything about it, but the main parts of the story, just the way that Freddy talks and his dialogue and the interaction that happens and the pacing, it's so extremely well done, and it's something that comes from somebody who is such a huge fan, a great filmmaker, an outstanding artist, and who really understands Fred Krueger.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, to me, the key to writing that character is just, to any character, is that you know them. And because I had lived with Freddy Krueger so intimately for so long, that script wrote itself. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what the moments and the beats were. So, and I knew his voice. I knew who he was as a person. I knew his motivations. To the point where even, like, I got so much flack about it's not canon because he had a wife and kid. And so one day I just said, all right, I'm going to write a scene that I would throw in. And I wish I had done it back then. I would have filmed it and had two versions of the movie.
That would have been kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost part of me is like, I wish we should just go back in and shoot this and just throw it in there and say, okay, guys, for the people who love Freddy's Dead and the Family Man thing, here's how I would have handled it that way. And I did. I just sat down and I wrote a scene between Russell and Krueger where, and I think it's on the Confession Facebook page in one of the posts where I wrote it, and I kind of just sat there and wrote it quickly. Like, it just flew out of me. Like, okay, this is what he would say if they brought up his wife and his daughter. And I basically said, this is how I would have handled it, because I'm not against the idea, because it is scary. A lot of people will argue, well, it's scary to think that this guy was living next door and nobody knew who he was. I was like, I totally agree. And then, and it's very hard to believe that there was a guy that was a drifter who was doing this and no one suspected him and he got away with it. That's all legit. But what people are overlooking is this is fantasy. These are fantasy stories, and Wes was very much into mythology and folklore and folktales, and the Freddy Krueger represented a very old idea of the outsider, the drifter that comes and steals your children at night. That's an old urban legend type creation, and an old, very, he's all about primal fears. That's what Wes was all about, being a humanities guy and into mythology, and that was all in his film. So while it may not be the most believable thing, that was what he was working with that character. And so I get the arguments against it, but it's like, at the same time, this is still fantasy, guys. It's still about a movie about a dream demon.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I totally respect the whole BTK thing where you got this guy who's like a church-going citizen who is actually strangling and murdering people at night, or on his off days, or whatever you want to say. But and that's scary. It's scary to think, like, the whole Ed Gein thing. This guy was their neighbor, and they had no idea he was digging up bodies and killing women and dressing them out like deers and wearing their skin at night. I mean, it's screwed up stuff. And but I said I can go both ways on that. I can make it scary. I can make it, and like my point of view with Freddy being a family man, if he were to be a family man, was that he really wasn't a family man, because in my opinion, Fred Krueger's not a lover. He doesn't have any love. He never was loved. The family unit does not exist to that guy. He never had anybody give a shit about him. So he would not even covet that. He's beyond that. Like, I don't see how he would have any capacity to even care or love somebody. So if he did, it would all be a mask. It would all be fake. And it would be, they were props. I think I wrote that in the piece, that they were props to him. They were like, if I shit in my own backyard, somebody's going to smell it. So I gotta, like, that's what it's like. Wow, why didn't you just murder your kid, or why didn't you murder? I was like, well, if I shit in my backyard, somebody's going to smell it. I can't kill my kid, but I don't love her. She's just, I got this woman. I knocked her up on the first date. We had a kid, and I married her because that's what you did in the 60s, 50s, or whatever. And, but it was not, there was no love to me in that character. And so I wrote this little piece, and it was so funny because I posted it. It's like, this is what I would have done if I did the Family Man. And people are like, oh my God, you sold me on the Family Man. I was like, well, I'm not against it, but it was, for me, as a fan, it was kind of a slap to the face in 1991 because that was not the character I was sold. That was not the character Wes envisioned. He's made that clear. That's why he did New Nightmare, because he didn't see anywhere for the story to go after Freddy's dead. But I'm totally cool with both options. Just that wasn't my Freddy.
Yeah, and what are some of the things that you've heard from fans, fellow fans that have surprised you or really excited you, and things maybe that just kind of blew your mind?
I knew going into it that we were going to get a lot of crap, and I prepared myself for that. And to our surprise, I was very overwhelmed by how positive it was taken. I had a lot of people come in naysaying. I had a lot of people, when I posted the trailer, like if you look at the YouTube trailer page versus the movie page, like people are shitting all over the trailer. Like people were like, they would see Kevin like, oh, I don't like the voice he's doing. He don't look like Robert. And
people are so shallow when it comes to that. You guys are limiting yourselves. And if you don't
no
like
idea.
that mindset, you better stop listening to Elm Street Radio, because that's the mindset that I hold. Okay, I've said my piece.
Yeah. But I understand it. Robert played him for 20 years, and I love Robert, and it's hard to accept it, but I don't buy into this. Nobody else can do it. There are so many actors who can do it, and Robert would tell you the same thing.
Yeah.
But, the thing with that was, I was getting a lot of people saying, you should get the guy from the Krueger films, Roberto Lombardi, And I had seen Roberto and I was impressed. I mean, Robert's a sweetheart. I've become friends. People try to pit us all against each other. And I know he was on your show and he kind of cleared the air and said, there is no rivalry between me and Kevin. And it's true, Roberto's stances, there's room for everybody. And, they did some exceptional stuff. But I knew even then, I was like, oh, man, Roberto's so loved by the fan base. They're like, they're not going to accept Kevin because, Roberto's just got Robert down and he looks a little like him. And so I knew there was going to be that. And I got that. I got people writing me saying, you should cast Roberto, or you should cast, I don't know the guy's name. He was supposed to be in that Son of a Hundred Maniacs trailer that came out.
John,
yeah. Everybody's saying, you should get that guy. And the thing is, like, they were not ready to give Kevin a chance at all. And I thought, no, guys, Kevin's the goods, man. I said, wait until you see this. So there were a lot of doubters. And I thought, oh, man, I don't even want to look at... I was like, I'm not even going to look at the comment sections when we post this. And then we posted it, and oddly enough, if you look at that page, I think we almost around 1,000 comments, and
wow.
I'd say 95% of them are all positive. People just saying that this did Wes, proud, and there are people who say that they consider it canon and they watch it with the marathons, and that just means the world. I mean, really, I never expected that. I just made something. I just love Nightmare, and I made the film for myself. I paid for it. I made it. I just wanted to do something as a testament to Wes and Robert, who meant so much to me, and to have fellow fans even bother to watch it, but also to say that they include it in their marathons and they consider it a legit addition to the story of Fred is, I mean, what can you ask? I mean, it was overwhelming, and it's still, still playing. I think we're coming up on this 2-year anniversary of it going live online.
Yeah, that's right.
On the 16th, and I think we're about to hit we're going towards 300,000 views, which we never expected, and it's still going strong, and it kind of, it's out there, and I'm kind of proud of that it's out there and was accepted, and I was never even going to show it to anybody originally. I was just going to I made it for myself. But yeah, I hate talking about it because I don't, I don't feel like it's, I don't know. I'm really proud of the film. we just made it for fun, and to have such a response to it, to have premiered it at Horror Hound with that audience there and Mark Patton and everybody there.
That was the whole reason that I was so excited to go to Horror Hound. I mean, yeah, they had all this stuff happening, but the thing that I was looking forward to most was to finally seeing your movie. And it didn't disappoint.
I'm glad. Yeah, I was. That was like, you were one of the people. There were a few people on the list of like, I really hope that they like it. I think you were one of the first people I went to say, hey, what did you think? A lot of people may not know that you were supposed to be in it originally.
I remember that whole conversation about the PJs. But, honestly, those pajamas are so dirty. And after Don't Fall Asleep, they're even dirtier because they were like, okay, you're covered in soot. And I was like, gee, what am I going to do? So I, rolled around on the mulch outside. So they're in bad shape right now. I have to get them cleaned up for Fred heads for reasons, and I'm like, but it's Don't Fall Asleep dirt, but still got some of that stuff. But yeah, that was an honor to be asked to be a part of that. I'm just really sad that I was so far away.
Well, I'm glad you got to be. I mean, you all announced, because for people who don't know, I had the movie done, or I don't think we had shot yet, but I said, I'm homaging Wes's movie and first movie. And that first movie is Nancy's movie. Like, it's Nancy.
Hell yeah, it is.
I love Nancy.
Hell yeah.
Nancy's one of the greatest characters in horror ever. And it doesn't feel right that Nancy's not even mentioned in this film, because I didn't want to be heavy-handed and say, we're gonna show this, and we're gonna show that, and we're gonna say Nancy, and we're gonna talk about that. I didn't even make Donald the interrogator, because I went with the deleted scene where Marge tells Nancy that she had an older sibling, and her friends had older siblings who were murdered by Freddy. And I said, if that were true, I don't think Donald Thompson would be allowed anywhere near Freddy in that interrogation room, because he would just come in and shoot him. He would never be able to sit there and talk to him. This guy killed his daughter. So that's why I didn't have Donald Thompson be the interrogating officer. I said, but at some point I'm going to have him burst in and try to kill him, or strangle him, or whatever. But yeah, I said, there has to be Nancy in this film. And I immediately said, and DeAndre has to play her. I said, because there's, if anybody's going to play Nancy, it has to be DeAndre. And I said, I'll do a little post-credit sequence where she's in the boiler room and burned Freddy jumps out. And yeah, I contacted you, and you're like, I didn't realize because we had met in, Indianapolis. Yeah. So I didn't have any idea where you were based. And I think it was like an 8-hour trip for you or something. I was like, damn it. Okay. So then you were willing to...
Crap.
And you were willing to let us use the pajamas. And I ended up casting Caitlin Corbin, who was kind of her little brother, Xander, was already cast as little Freddy. And her mom, I was looking for a Nancy. I was like, I need a girl next door type to play Nancy. And she said, well, what about Caitlin? And it's like, I hadn't met Caitlin yet. And I saw her picture, and I went... She's definitely got the girl next door type, but it was so funny with her because she wears glasses, so we're in a dark place, the boiler room, and she can't see at all. And I'm trying to direct her, but we're also trying to get the lighting right, because I don't want to see Freddy when he jumps out behind her, because I had planned on having him wear the David Miller stunt mask from part 1, and I forgot it, and the shoot was like 2 hours away from my house. It's like, well, shit, we're just going to keep you in the dark.
Sugar honey iced tea.
Just have you, so getting that lighting right, making sure she didn't kill herself and run into machines and fall, split her head open, was fun. But yeah, she had really straight hair, so they had to frizz her hair out and curl it all out. And, and I made the costume. I went to, I got some scrubs and white scrubs, and took pockets off, and went to Hobby Lobby and got little flowers and glued them on, and I was like, it works.
You did the Nancy method for putting the pajamas together. You were super resourceful.
But yeah, it wasn't you. But then when you all announced don't fall asleep, I was like, well, great. The John is finally going to get to represent her on film, as she should, and. Y'all did a fantastic job. You nailed. You knew the character. and it came out. Like it's like no one understands this character more than these people. So I'm sure it's going to work. It's going to be right on.
I appreciate that, Nathan. Thank you. So I know that, I've kept you on and you're a very, very busy man, but we might have to do a part 2. We'll probably have to do a part 2. I'm doing a lot of part 2s with this show because I love to listen to everybody talk, and I'd love to have you back on to maybe delve into the films a little bit more, and I know I definitely want to talk to you about Wes Craven, and so we'll probably have to save that for Nathan Thomas Milliner episode 2.0, but where might everybody be able to find your work? And go ahead and list it and give a little bit of your Never Sleep Again shameless self-promo in there too.
You mean Never Sleep Again, the coffee table book?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been really fortunate to work on some nightmare things. I'm really like the Never Sleep Again book that Tommy Hudson did. They originally wrote me. I was friends with Lito, and he wrote me and asked me if I had any Nightmare 1 artwork. And I said, yeah, I got a few. And I said, and the thing is, I had always wanted to do a Nightmare coffee table book. And I said, hey, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. He said, oh, well, we may be able to help each other out, because he wasn't telling me it was a book. And so he told me, and I said, well, who's doing the cover for that? And he said, oh, we're using the same cover from the documentary. And I was like, well, dude, like, isn't that going to confuse people? He said, why is it? You're calling it the same thing, and you're going to use the same artwork? People are just going to think this is the documentary, and they're just going to go, oh, I've already got that.
Yeah, that was a really good call.
Some people did when they did the Kickstarter for it. They had my artwork on there, and still people were like, oh, I've got that already. I've seen that. So I said, you got to do something unique and original. And I knew they were almost done, and they didn't have a budget. And, I'm a professional artist, so I was like, I don't really do a lot of stuff for free anymore because I just don't have the time to do stuff for free. But I thought, if you ever do anything for free, Nathan, it's the definitive account of the making of your favorite horror film of all time for Wes Craven. And I told them that. I just bled out my heart to Tommy and Lito. Told them what it meant to me. I was like, I know you guys are super fans. I am too. If you have one penny in your budget, I'll do it for that. And, they were just like, oh, all right, show us what you got. Lito wrote me and said, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you get to do this cover. And I ended up doing it. And, it's just one of those things where it's one of my favorite, proudest gigs that I ever had because, again, it's homaging my favorite horror film.
You have a little nod to Nancy in there too, right?
Yeah, I mean that was since it's an unofficial book, we couldn't use any imagery from the film, so I had to. If anybody's ever wondered, like, I couldn't draw Robert, I couldn't draw Freddy, I couldn't draw Heather, so I had to be very surrealistic about it and kind of just took a cue from Matthew Peak and handled it that way. But yeah, I mean, stuff like that, and like NECA hired me to do a lot of Freddy figure artwork for their retro series, and Fright Rags. I've done shirts for Freddy. So, this is a dream come true to become a horror artist and get to draw these icons that I love. And anytime it was Freddy, I was just on cloud nine. Like NECA was like this big wild thing where I was talking to somebody like a day or two before, and I said, NECA is one of those companies I haven't worked for yet that I would love to, like, it was my number one company to work for. I'd love to do some of those retro figures they're doing it. And then the next day I get an email from Randy, who runs NECA. He said, hey, would you be interested in doing the Freddy's Revenge action figure?
So wild.
What? So, yeah, I mean, it's been great, and anytime I get to do anything nightmare related, of course, I'm over the moon about it. As far as finding me, I mostly just operate through Facebook, Nathan Thomas Milliner. I have a website, but I haven't touched it in years. I know I always hate the whole tell people where you can find them part, because I don't want to talk about
Nathan Thomas Milliner. Google
stuff.
him and you will find everything.
I did that one time. I was on a podcast and they asked me that question. I did. I said, just Google my name, and they they started laughing. I said, that came out a lot more conceited than I thought. It's like
Google
they were
my
like,
name, you'll find
yeah,
everything.
just Google me name. It's like I think they were joking with like Will Ferrell and yeah, I'm kind of a big deal. Just like, that's not what I meant, guys. I was like, it was actually the opposite. I'm like, I don't want to talk about where you can find me. I don't want to pimp myself out. It's like, just Google it. Like, it was really this kind of like, no, I don't want to talk about that. Just, I'm here to have a conversation. Because that podcast was not about me at all. It was about the Scream series, I think. And we were talking about the Scream movies. And they're like, now pimp yourself. I'm like, no, I'm here to talk about Scream. I'm not here to talk about me.
I will talk about you enough.
Other people can talk about me. They can shit all over me if they want, but I hate having to be. I hate self-promotion. Some people are like, well, you do a lot of it. I'm like, well, you have to if you're going to make money. You're going to, you got to have a career. But I got to pay my bills. I got an 8-year-old daughter who likes Littlest Pet Shops.
Yeah, so everybody, if you need a commission, even for a tattoo, which, by the way, I commissioned Nathan to design my Nancy tattoo, and it is beautiful, and I look at it every day, and I love it, and Heather Langenkamp loves it. Actually, when I saw her at Flashback, I was at her table, and she mentioned about having tattoos on her website or something. I said, and I've got, and I have my tattoo, and she goes, it's a beautiful tattoo. Did you see I put up the picture of it? And I was like, So she loved it from the moment she saw it. Yeah,
I never hear that. I'm glad you told me that, because I never, hear that stuff. Like, I never got to meet Wes, unfortunately, and but Lito told me that Wes really loved the cover I did for Never Sleep Again. Thought it was beautiful. It's like, well, that's all I need. And I did hear him. He did tweet about my Shocker artwork from Scream Factory, so
that's awesome.
I can cherish that tweet forever, that Wes Craven liked my artwork for Shocker. But it's like, you never hear that. Like, I had been told around, that Robert said that Confession was well made or whatever, because I never had gotten a chance to talk to him or see if he even bothered to watch it. But I heard he did, and he liked it. But I don't know. But yeah, it's always nice to hear from the people. I mean, luckily, like at the premiere, Joseph Whipp was there in the audience who got to work on that film, and he really liked it. Him and his wife actually turned down a dinner engagement to come to the movie to see it, which was really sweet of them. And Mark Patton, of course, was there in the front row every night and making me take a bow, which was just so flattering, because Mark, he's been on your show. He's such a sweetheart, so supportive of his fans, and I just stood there thinking, I was introduced to the series through Mark Patton. He was the first thing I ever saw in a Nightmare movie. On part 2 was my first, so to have him standing there, holding my hand, making me bow, it was so emotional, because it was 2 weeks after Wes had passed away, which I know yesterday was the anniversary.
It was the anniversary.
And I had never been affected by a passing of a celebrity more than that. I was crying for weeks. It was crazy. Because I never, when I started doing, I've done, so many conventions and worked so many things and met, hundreds of celebrities. And when I started doing them, I said, there's 3 guys I want to meet. I want to meet Robert, I want to meet John Carpenter, and I want to meet Wes Craven. And I've gotten to meet the other 2, but I never got a chance to meet Wes. And, I'll never get that. And it was kind of like, shit. I was listening to an interview with him today, and it's like, God, I would have loved to sit down with that guy for just 15 minutes and just talked about filmmaking and horror and life. So much you could do in 15 minutes. But, we still have the interviews. We still have his films, his intelligence, his everything, So that's enough.
Absolutely, Nathan. So, well, thank you so much for coming on Elm Street Radio today. I very much appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone has enjoyed hearing from you.
Hey, it was a pleasure, and yeah, we'll do a part 2 anytime. Maybe we can get Paige on there. Or
oh, yeah, it'll be
whoever.
A fun party. Well, Nathan, enjoy your evening, and make sure that if you are to fall asleep, that you do take a fair dose of Hypnocil.